Einen wunderschönen guten Tag, was geht? Willkommen zurück auf dem UNCUT-Channel. Heute will ich mir mal ein Video mit euch zusammen anschauen und zwar folgendes: The Little Things Rebirth Island. Tatsächlich ist es so, dass dieser Bertha Speed hier die Videos gemacht hat, die gefühlt jeder schon gesehen hat mit den, ja, The Little Things auf Warzone und sowas. Hier 422.000 Aufrufe hat das auch. Ich habe auf einem anderen Channel, habe ich mir die Videos auch angeschaut, habe ich aber keine Reactions zu aufgenommen. Der hat einige Dinge an Warzone kritisiert und viele, ja, so Quality of Life Changes, sage ich mal, auch einfach schon, ja, mehr oder weniger angekündigt und hat davor schon gesagt, so, ey, das und das ist an Warzone geil und das verstehe ich nicht, wieso das nicht so ist, wie es eben, ja, sein sollte. Und viele von diesen Änderungen wurden dann tatsächlich auch im Game so übernommen. Also ziemlich sicher ist das entweder einer, ja, der irgendwie gute Kontakte zu den Entwicklern hat, oder die Entwickler haben die Videos auch gesehen und haben dazu gestimmt und haben sich gedacht, so, ey, das könnte man wirklich alles machen. Wie beispielsweise diese neue Übersicht, dass man ja links unten im Heads-Up-Display immer stehen hat, wie viele Platten hat der Teammate, hat er eine Streak dabei und sowas. Das sind alles Dinge, die in seinen Videos ja erwähnt wurden und die wurden dann auch alle so umgesetzt. Und da gibt es jetzt ein neues Video, das ist erst 4 Tage alt, hat auch echt wenig Aufrufe so im Vergleich zu den anderen Videos und da geht es eben explizit um Rebirth und das möchte ich mir jetzt gemeinsam mit euch anschauen. Ab geht's. An der Stelle kurze Information noch für euch, beziehungsweise kurze Bitte. Checkt unbedingt mal ab, ob ihr den Kanal hier abonniert habt. Ich habe ja mehrere Kanäle und wenn ihr den Main-Channel abonniert habt, ist das cool. Aber es kann sein, dass ihr den Channel hier noch nicht abonniert habt. Und eventuell schaffen wir es dieses Jahr noch, die 100.000 Abonnenten zu knacken. Wenn ihr mich dabei unterstützen wollt, gerne ein Abo da lassen und wie immer auch gerne ein Like, wenn euch das Video gefällt. Jetzt gucken wir mal das Video hier. Ich mache euch hier mal Untertitel auch an. Sind zwar auf Englisch und das Video ist auf Englisch, aber ich hoffe, es ist alles verständlich.
Stood out. You can find games incredibly quickly. Like, after queuing, I'll get put into a lobby within 10 or 15 seconds.
Ja, man findet immer sehr schnell eine Runde.
Over the games I've played on Caldera, I'd estimate that the average queue time is around 5 or 6 minutes, maybe even longer.
Nee, so lange auch nicht.
Lobby, sure. But we're talking about finding games 30 times as quickly. That would seem
also ich habe 5 bis 6 Minuten im Durchschnitt für eine Caldera-Lobby suchen, so lange brauche ich jetzt auch nicht, muss ich sagen. Vielleicht ist es in Amerika nochmal anders.
The vast majority of players prefer Rebirth.
Das stimmt.
And from what I can see online, this seems to be a general consensus. With that said, and given the requests I've received, I've been meaning to make a Rebirth video for quite some time. The problem was, I just hadn't played it enough. I always liked Verdansk so much that I never really gave Rebirth too much of a chance.
1:1 das Gleiche.
Caldera arrived, I, like many others, have found myself playing Rebirth more and more.
Das ist ehrlich krass, ne? Ich habe zu Verdansk-Zeiten nie Rebirth gespielt. Am Anfang, als es ins Game reinkam, ja, so ein bisschen, aber ich habe es nie so gefühlt. Ich fand einfach dieses Battle Royale viel geiler als so diesen Multiplayer-Style, ja, Rebirth-Modus. Und jetzt spiele ich auch deutlich lieber Rebirth als Caldera. Das ist schon krass und ich glaube, die meisten von euch auch, ne? Also das ist so ein genereller Trend, der sich in die Richtung entwickelt hat, dass das kaum jemand mehr spielt, Caldera.
And more importantly, any future resurgence maps can be improved. And I'm going to start with some thoughts on the different game modes themselves.
Ja. Weil ich muss auch sagen, ich finde Rebirth nicht perfekt.
I couldn't really find anything to complain about. In fact, given how lacking the STYLERZ experience in Warzone has always been, I'd argue that it's among the best modes they've ever implemented.
Ja.
Duos, by contrast, is Rebirth's worst mode.
Ja,
there are many
mit
players
Abstand.
that don't have fun playing it, and it's not hard to see why. Take this example. I get a really cheap kill on this guy with a heli, meaning the radar shows me exactly where his teammate is. This guy was at a huge disadvantage. In duos, it's just too easy for your team to be wiped and for you to be out of the game. With the consequence of this being that lobbies die out far too quickly. By the end of the first circle, half the lobby will probably be gone. There's often less than 10 plays by the end of the second. And as for the third,
Rebirth Duos ist wirklich Quatsch. Verstehe nicht, wie es Leute gibt, die da Spaß dran haben. Es macht wirklich überhaupt keinen Spaß. Es ist nicht fast-paced genug, die Lobbys sterben zu schnell aus, ein Win fühlt sich da langweilig an und du stirbst auch einfach zu schnell. Das ist in Solos viel besser gelöst, dass du immer halt diesen Respawn nach 15 Sekunden hast und in Squads halt, oder Trios von mir aus auch, viel besser gelöst halt mit größeren Squad-Sizes, dass du halt dann auch, ja, eine höhere Wahrscheinlichkeit hast, wiederzukommen, weil sonst musst du dich immer auf ein Teammate verlassen.
It's obvious as to why this happens. After dying in Rebirth, you only respawn if your teammate survives a specific number of seconds. For duos, it's 15 seconds during the first circle, 20 during the second, and 30 during the third until Rebirth is disabled in the fourth circle. Now here are the quads numbers. Let's say you've just died, and let's say you're in the first circle. In duos, you've got 1 teammate left, and in quads, you've got 3. Do you think it's easier for an opposing team to kill one player in 15 seconds or 3 players in 25? It's this one, of course. It's not even close. On top of this, there's actions that decrease the timer. Things like looting crates, or picking up contracts, or getting downs and kills. In quads, you have 3 teammates. 3 teammates working to decrease your respawn timer. This is why quads is so much better. When you die, there's a really good chance you come back. The same can't be said for duos. The respawn system is designed for game modes with multiple teammates, but it's applied to duos where you only have one. Now, there's many things you could do to make duos better. One suggestion I've seen is to increase the player count.
Ja.
Going from 46 to 60 players.
Safe, das wäre so wichtig.
Go longer, but it would also mean more chaos and, dare I say it, even more third parties. You'd be heading back to the main menu even more frequently. A better solution would look to decrease the respawn times. Doing so would mean players respawn more often, making games go longer. But I think duos needs an even bigger change.
Ja.
I would like to see it take some inspiration from solos.
Ich glaube auch, dass Respawn-Token oder generell, dass es besser wäre, ja, so ein Respawn-Token selbst zu haben.
Respawning depending entirely on your teammates' ability to survive, it also depended on how long you survived. A hybrid system. That is, the respawn times remain as is, but every player gets a personal timer. With this system, here's how a duos game would look. At the start, just like solos, you get a respawn. You can go to Control Center, instantly get wiped, and then both come back.
Ja.
Straight away.
Wäre deutlich besser schon.
5 teams aren't gone in the first 30 seconds. After landing back in, the timer starts. And if you survive the timer, you get to come back. Just like solos, doing contracts and getting kills decreases it. You get rewarded for actually moving around and fighting and getting kills. What's more, since you're no longer solely reliant on your teammates to respawn, they can die over and over again. That's okay, as long as you're playing well, such that you're surviving these times, you'll be able to come back. On the other hand, if you're dying over and over, you can still rely on your teammates. And later in the game, when all the times increase, you don't have to tell your teammate to go and sit in
Das ist auch so logisch.
If they really want, they can try their hand at climbing this ladder. It won't go well, but they've earned a respawn. They're coming back, meaning your timer will continue to count down so you can come back as well.
Ja.
Is this a perfect solution? Certainly not. Of course,
aber es ist sehr viel besser. Es ist sehr viel besser und so würde ich Duos auf jeden Fall auch mal mehr tryen.
But the solution itself isn't really the point. They could do something as simple as adding an extra life so that teams get one chance to respawn after getting wiped. That would still be great. Any change that leads to teams surviving longer is a massive improvement over current duos. It doesn't matter what they do, they just need to do something. Trios and quads are my favorite Rebirth modes, but only when I'm playing with people I know.
Nee,
playing with
ich sag's wie es ist. Klar, Squads macht da manchmal Bock, aber ich finde Solo mittlerweile fast am allergeilsten.
Are they going to buy me back after Rebirth is disabled? Are they going to drop money so we can buy a loadout? Am I going to start the game with a full squad? Are my teammates going to leave as soon as they die? These last two are the most important. If you're playing trios and one of your teammates leaves, you're suddenly playing a much worse version of Rebirth duos, fighting teams of 3 instead of 2. You shouldn't be punished for your teammate backing out because they died, and you certainly shouldn't be punished for not being given a teammate to begin with. With that said, I wanted to get a sense for how often this occurred. I played 50 trios games and 50 quads games, and I recorded how many teammates I started each game with, and how frequently my teammates would leave. Here are the numbers for trios. In 34 games, 68% of the time, I started the game with a full squad. And in 6 games, 12% of the time, I wasn't given any teammates.
Boah.
The other side of the table represents the team size at the end of the game. That is, it's measuring how often people would leave games early. For example, in 14 games, I finished the game as a duo. Meaning 14 is the sum of the times where I started the game as a duo and finished as a duo, and the times where I started the game as a trio and finished as a duo.
Das ist schon bodenlos, ne?
Keep in mind, I didn't count it as leaving a game when my teammates played out the entire game and then left after Rebirth was disabled. This happened almost every time the game lasted that long. This number summarizes the results quite well. It says, how often was I playing random fill trios from start to finish as a trio with 2 teammates? 58% of the time. That's not very good. And again, I assumed this number would have been far lower, but random fill trios was a little better than I expected. But what about quads? As before, the same summary table can be created, where these numbers have the same interpretations. And again, this number says how often I was playing quads with 3 teammates, a full squad. only 18 games.
Das
a
ist
little
echt
over
bodenlos.
1/3 of the time. That's pretty bad.
Ja.
If the devs want to improve the Resurgence game mode for the many players that play with randoms, they need to ask the following. How can we better fill lobbies so that players start with a full squad? And how can we prevent players from leaving games? Starting with the first question, I'll be the first to admit that I know precisely nothing about programming matchmaking, but I think I can make
Matchmaking
one
ist auch
useful
so,
observation.
wir wissen einfach nicht, wie das
In each
funktioniert.
Rebirth mode, there's a maximum number of players that can fit in a lobby, and in several games where I wasn't given a full squad, this maximum was reached. Designing it like this is problematic. A trio's lobby, for instance, can fit 45 players, 15 teams of 3. If one team elects to play as a duo, such that they choose the don't fill option, there will be 44 players left. As such, if anyone else joins a lobby, they'll be left short-handed. There's no room to join a different team, and the
Ja, das müsste man viel variabler gestalten.
So there's no room to add additional players to the lobby.
Das müsste man
The
viel
easy way to
variabler
address
gestalten.
this is to place a limit on the number of teams, not the number of players. In this example, had there been a predefined trios limit of, say, 15 teams, then this player wouldn't be going into this game as a solo because they wouldn't get placed in that lobby to begin with. Doing it like this would just mean there were fewer times you were going into a Rebirth game without any teammates.
Aber wenn du viele Solo-Suchende dann in die Lobby bekommst, dann kann es auch sein, oder das, also wenn 2, 3 Leute da dann ohne Auffüllen anmachen, dann hast du halt eine leere Lobby
What
gefühlt,
about
ne?
preventing players from leaving games? This is something I've seen talked about a lot.
Auch keine
And the
perfekte Lösung.
suggested solution is generally, we need a quitting penalty.
Ja.
That is, if someone leaves a game or too early, they need to be penalized. Say, having to wait a few minutes before they can queue again. And if they keep quitting, this time increases. This would probably work, but it brings some problems. What happens when you disconnect? Do we really trust they'll be able to distinguish someone lagging out from someone quitting? What's more, Rebirth's not a competitive mode. If someone's really not having fun, for whatever reason, they should be able to back out without penalty. And regardless, if someone wants to quit a game, but they don't because they'll be penalized, I'm not convinced they'd be that great of a teammate anyway. I think, instead of asking how we can prevent players from leaving, we should ask, how can we make it more enjoyable for the remaining players? Not only would this address the cases where your teammates quit, but also when they lag out, or when you're not given a teammate at the start.
Ja.
And I think the solution
Ich glaube, er würde sagen, dass je nachdem, wie viele Teammates du hast, dein Respawn-Counter geringer sein soll.
These are the respawn times for each circle in duos, trios, and quads. Here's what's interesting.
Sollte dann angepasst
If you're
werden.
playing quads, and if you're in the second circle, the respawn time is 35 seconds. If one teammate leaves, the respawn time is 35 seconds. If 2 teammates leave, the respawn time is still 35 seconds. So if you're playing a quads game, and if you've only got one teammate left, not only are you fighting 2v4s, but if your teammate dies, you'll need to survive 35 seconds, almost twice that of normal duos. Keep in mind, the 20 seconds for normal duos is too high. It doesn't work. So how do you think someone's going to go having to survive 35 seconds and having to survive that time
Das
while
müsste man
fighting teams
ändern.
of 4?
Es ist halt auch wieder, das war bei den anderen Videos auch so. Ja, und Drip.
Rebirth revolves around your teammates surviving.
Es ist wieder so logisch und so sinnvoll und jeder fragt sich dann im Nachhinein so, warum ist es nicht eigentlich schon so? Das ist bei den Videos von ihm echt krass.
But the times don't change depending on how many teammates you have. It's nonsensical.
Ja.
Here's how it should work. When you're playing quads and one teammate leaves, the respawn times should
Genau das, was ich gesagt habe gerade.
in-game to match those of regular trios.
Oha, wie
In fact,
perfekt das gerade mit
since
meiner
playing
Cam passt
trio
hier.
quads is harder than regular trios, there should be some number less than these.
Ja.
In the cases where you're left playing duo quads or duo trios, you could make the numbers similar to normal duos.
Das wäre auch
However,
übel krass, dann könnte man auch einfach, wenn man nur einen Teammate hat, dann könnte man sagen so, ey, lass zu zweit reingehen ohne Randoms. Das würde das halt auch einfach interessanter machen.
You'd still be playing duos, which is just the worst. So ideally, they'd first fix duos and then apply the fix to these cases,
Ja.
adjusting appropriately for the
Ey, das
added
würde
difficulty of
Rebirth
fighting
so
extra
viel
players.
geiler machen. Man hätte so
Lastly,
viel
the
mehr
cases where
Möglichkeiten
you're
zu
left playing
spielen.
solo. These are actually the worst ones, because if you die, your game is over. You
Ja.
don't get to respawn at all.
Ja.
Of course it shouldn't work like this.
Ja.
After all your teammates leave, you should then be given a
Bro,
solo.
ich würde ja so in Solo-Squads reingehen die ganze Zeit. Hä? Ich würde mich da so sehen mit dem Solo-Rebirth-Counter, den ich immer alleine machen muss, aber halt gegen Squads. Das wäre auch für so viele Leute gut zum Trainieren, wie man das halt am besten spielt. Und es ist halt einfach scheiße, wenn du wirklich Solo-Squads suchst in Rebirth und du stirbst, ist die Runde vorbei. Ne? Wenn das wirklich so geregelt werden sollte, dann wäre Rebirth so krass.
Now, not everyone is going to want to continue playing a trios game by themselves. That's okay. But for those that do, give them a chance to actually play, to actually enjoy a game, to have more than one death before their game.
Und es kann eigentlich nicht so unfassbar schwierig sein, das umzusetzen.
My prior videos talked about many gameplay-related problems, and since those videos, many of the things I mentioned got fixed. For example, you can now cut your parachute when you're close to the ground.
Oh mein Gott, das war so scheiße, das war so kacke, dass das 1,5 Jahre, fast 2 Jahre im Game war. Du konntest ab einer gewissen Höhe keinen Fallschirm mehr cutten. Das ist so dumm gewesen.
Those videos were very long, and for the sake of not repeating myself, just note that most of the problems that weren't fixed are also applicable to Rebirth. Airstrikes still kill you through buildings.
Bodenlos.
Ziplines are still a guaranteed death.
Ja.
Still, here are some areas related to Rebirth's gameplay that I wanted to draw particular attention to.
Audio, HP Increase. Oh, da könnt ihr mir auch gerne mal in die Kommentare schreiben, ob ihr das gut findet, dass das Leben von 100 auf 150 erhöht wurde. Buy Station, Map Design, ja, dieser Turm soll weg.
Starting with mantling. I feel like you just automatically mantle over everything on this map. Every now and
Scheiße ist
then, I
das.
get killed because the game just throws me off a building. Nova.
Ja. Ich hasse es.
Control.
Ich hasse es.
Prison.
Es gibt fast... der Spot ist besonders ekelhaft. Der Spot ist wirklich besonders ekelhaft. Das ist eine Sache, die... ich bin schon so oft deshalb gestorben. Und das ist eine Sache, die ich schon seit Anfang an von Warzone sage. Das fuckt so ab.
Warum? Was pretty bad on Verdansk. And there's some really annoying spots on Caldera. But it might be worse on Rebirth. Another
So oft
thing
sterbe ich
that's really
deshalb.
prominent on Rebirth is mantling objects while shooting. It's no secret that jumping is an essential part of winning gunfights. And once you do it enough, it almost becomes muscle memory to jump while shooting, at least at close range. The problem is when you unintentionally mantle something close by.
Warum gibt es überhaupt, das verstehe ich nicht, warum gibt es eine Rückwärts-Kletteranimation? Gibt es ein Szenario, in dem man rückwärts klettern möchte? Man dreht sich doch, wenn man irgendwo draufklettern will, dann dreht man sich so hin, dass du seitlich oder vorwärts quasi draufkletterst und nicht rückwärts. Warum gibt's das überhaupt?
And it forces you to stop ADSing. When this happens, it'll often get you killed.
Ja,
I
immer.
don't know why you would ever want to mantle something while you're shooting or ADSing. It just shouldn't be possible.
Ja.
The most significant change of the recent updates was increasing Rebirth's base health from 100 to 150. On Caldera, this is exactly what most players wanted, and it works really well. You might be alive for 25 minutes. Each life means more. With only 100 HP, you don't have that extra time to get to cover. With 100 HP on Rebirth, it's also true that you die really, really quickly. Here, with almost full plates, I died in just 7 bullets, at decent range, to an XM4. With that said, I'm not sure too many people were bothered by this. Rebirth games are shorter, and if you're lucky to have some decent teammates, you might respawn 6, 7, even 8 times in a single match. Each life doesn't mean as much, and 150 HP just feels off. I shouldn't have survived this. This guy should have gone down sooner. If 2 players run up that staircase instead of 1, you lose. I don't even want to talk about.
Und dann das neue Perk windend. Bodenlos.
Snake Perk.
Ja, genau das. Bro, das kann so nervig sein.
But 150 is definitely too much.
Ja, ich finde auch, dass 150 HP auf Rebirth nicht optimal ist.
Stations. First, why can't you buy teammates back for free during a fire sale? It's free on the other maps, but it costs 1500 on Rebirth.
Stimmt.
I don't really get it. Also, I never really understood why some buy stations don't spawn. You'll often need to buy a quick set of plates, but you can't. Or you'll have enough money for an early loadout, but you'll need to go halfway across the map because the 3 closest buy stations aren't there. Spawning all the buy stations in every match would be a welcomed change.
Ja, und es gibt auch einfach keinen Grund, dass das nicht so sein sollte, meiner Meinung nach.
Out of the 3 Warzone maps, I feel that Verdansk, at least towards the end of its lifespan, had the best audio. Caldera's a step down, and Rebirth's on par with Caldera. Supposedly, the audio was improved in the most recent patch.
Nichts, 0,0 hat sich da geändert. Könnt ihr mir nicht erzählen, dass die Audio viel besser geworden ist.
Countless times, there's a guy running right behind me and I can't hear a thing.
Nicht einen Schritt gehört.
To be fair, I don't know if this is always a complete lack of footstep audio, or I just can't hear them because half the time I'm playing this game mode, there's an airstrike overhead. Like, why are so many airstrikes lying around? And why are there airstrikes in every other chest?
Auch an der Stelle einfach mal ein dicker Mittelfinger geht raus an den Cluster-Strike, der nie das macht, wo er hingesetzt wird. Wirklich, der wird 40 Meter von euch entfernt gesetzt und ihr denkt euch so, oh, da laufe ich mal lieber weg. Seid dann 50 Meter entfernt, der erste Cluster landet direkt auf eurem Arsch. So, macht gar keinen Sinn.
A good start to improving Rebirth's audio would be to decrease the spawn rate of airstrikes by around 99%. Also, why is the fire sale notification twice as loud as anything else in the game?
Ja, danke. Habe ich mich auch schon sehr oft drüber aufgeregt.
Next is the vertical audio. Warzone's always had this problem. It's just more pronounced on Rebirth. Prison, Nova, Chemical, Bio, Control. Anywhere you go, you're dealing with horrible vertical audio. Are they above?
Man weiß nie, ob die oben oder unten sind.
I have no idea.
Ja, doch, same level weiß man manchmal.
Of all the comments I've received talking about problems with Rebirth, the most common is about campers, camping this tower, camping buildings,
bodenlos.
camping loadouts. If you want to
Ich weiß nicht wieso, ob das ein Vorurteil von mir ist, aber mir fällt das immer auf Rebirth. Es gibt immer ein Team auf Rebirth, was hier drin campt, und in irgendwie 60% der Fälle ist es ein Team, was Frankreich-Flagge und TTV als Clan-Tag hat. Das ist immer sehr geil. Das ist eine lustige Beobachtung, die ich gemacht habe.
I just think the map could be made a little less favorable to players that don't like to move around. Take, for instance, this tower. I'm not saying it's as bad as this one, but it can't be far off. From the top, players get a 360-degree view of the map. And from the bottom, there's next to zero counterplay. One ladder to the top, so it's impossible to push. And even if you get a knock, you can't really get the full. The only way to get to the top is by landing in, but even then, it's pretty hard to get the kill with some crappy pistol.
Erstens das und dann auch diese Landeanimation, wo du nicht direkt schießen kannst und so.
Fight the tower isn't the worst part. It's that when you're trying to fight elsewhere, there's always someone shooting at you from this tower. It's one of the worst things about this map. The thing is, it's kind of a hard problem to fix. A ladder on the outside would take too long. Ziplines are still ziplines.
Warum ist die Zipline-Animation eigentlich so langsam? Warum kann das nicht einfach ultra schnell sein und während dem Ding kannst du sogar deine Waffe benutzen oder sowas? Warum?
Probably not. When I saw they were adding balloons, I thought this tower was one of the reasons. Imagine being able to land on these guys.
Es gibt keinen Ballon, mit dem man da oben landen kann, ne?
Das ist doch so dumm. Every game. But the Rebirth balloons give very little height and distance.
Und die brauchen auch viel zu lange, bis du da oben bist.
Would getting rid of it altogether be that bad?
Nö, wäre super.
The thing about this map is probably the water tower. I never thought it was
Der nervt mich nicht so krass.
But ever since the snipers got nerfed, camping up there makes it so hard to die, yet it's so easy to mount up and get kills. Aside from the towers, I don't have much else to say. Maybe it could be made a little easier to rotate from some POIs. A good example is living quarters to headquarters. There just isn't enough cover to be fighting players uphill. And maybe a few more jump spots or ladders would be good. The rooftop below the tower, for example, can only be accessed via a single ladder. So anyone on that rooftop is kind of invincible. A ladder on the outside totally fixes that. The only other thing I'd like to mention is how much everyone loves to camp loadouts. It's a really good strategy, and it'll almost certainly net you kills because, for one, loadouts often land in really bad areas. Below the hill at living quarters.
Oh ja. Die Loadout-Spots sind schon echt eklig
right
manchmal.
Next to this house. It makes it really hard to get a loadout.
Ja, da musst du halt von der anderen Seite halt hingehen, ne?
Next, loadouts often land in groups. This is a duos game, and there's only 10 teams remaining. 3 loadouts dropped here, and 2 more just a little bit up the hill. It is only the start of the second zone. The circle is this big. Why are half the loadouts landing so close to each other? Even if all the teams were close by, spreading them out a little bit would make it so much easier, because right now, grabbing the free loadout is far too often a lot harder than it should be.
Ja. Auch wieder einfach so eine logische Sache. Einfach so eine logische Sache. Der Typ ist einfach zu smart.
In the past few months, Warzone has received a lot of updates, and I think most would agree, there's been a lot of really good changes.
Ja,
as an
muss man auch sagen.
example, my previous video talked about how awful Caldera's launch was, and quite literally, every single thing I mentioned was addressed in some way. What's more, one theme of the recent updates have been quality of life changes.
Ja.
And again, these have essentially been a collection of things I've previously talked about. Some of these were very obvious, long-standing problems, and I simply
Gasmaske-Animation ist immer noch ein Problem an der Stelle.
But many problems I mentioned were
Sollen die Animation
unique
immer
to my
rausnehmen.
videos. Not many people, much less the developers themselves, we're emphasizing the so-called little things. All in all, about half of the problems I highlighted are no longer problems. They are now fixed in the game. It's also worth mentioning that the range of times I spent talking about each problem and suggesting solutions was very wide. I spent a really long time, close to 5 minutes, talking about the HUD, which we got, and I spent 5 seconds talking about the inability to move over downed players, which is still the same. That is to say,
Gottlos,
proportionally speaking, the number is different. It's more like 70%. That's crazy, right? I'm genuinely curious as to how many times they've watched my videos. It's not surprising that so many of you instantly came back to comment with each new update. But to answer the common question of whether or not I received any credit, no. Absolutely nothing.
Das war's. Okay, ja, interessantes Video. Ich würde alles, was er vorgeschlagen hat, gerne so übernehmen. Ihr könnt mir gerne mal eure Meinung dazu auch in die Kommentare schreiben, würde mich interessieren. Ja, gutes Video und ich hoffe, das eine oder andere wird da übernommen. Der eine oder andere Entwickler schaut da wieder das Video von ihm an und dann kriegen wir wieder gute Änderungen in Warzone. Das wäre super.